Welcome to today's edition of Market Outsiders. Today, we are talking all things media and sports, specifically media rights for the NFL. And if you are not someone who's into sports, don't worry. This is not going to be a breakdown of last night's game. We are not here to talk about, players or teams. We're here to talk specifically about the business of sports and how professional sports leagues rely more and more on media partnerships to drive a bulk of their revenue. Before we get into that conversation, my name's Namaan. I'm joined by my colleague Jenny Rae today. And if you like Market Outsiders, if you've been following us for some time and you haven't yet rated or left a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please go ahead and do that. It just lets the algorithm know that this is quality content that you're finding value in. So please go ahead and take 5 seconds to do that. While you're doing that, Jenny Rae, welcome to today's episode. How are you?
Hi, Namaan. I'm really excited to go through this episode. And I just want to pull three kind of what would seemingly be disassociated pieces of conversation that I've had over the last week that led to the genesis of this conversation. Because one of the things we're not just trying to do is talk about a single business concept, but also try to tease back how we got there. I think that if you're trying to build business acumen, if you're trying to become a business advisor, if you want to become a strategic contributor inside whatever environment you're in. We work with a lot of folks on corporate training that are working on doing that. Part of the goal is to start to leverage every single learning opportunity that you have. And I just want to start out by saying that in my family, on Saturday, but mostly on Sunday, I grew up before you could have like screen on screen TV, and we actually had 4 TVs. My dad would plug all 4 TVs into our living room, and we would have 4 separate TVs set up where we could watch 4 different games on Sunday. So we would like come home from church, right? Make a family lunch, which was usually like soup and a big bowl of popcorn or something like that. And then, if you didn't want to watch sports, there were no other options on Sunday. So I grew up in a family where I had to literally plan my wedding time around the Auburn, Alabama game that week during Thanksgiving week. I mean, it was like sports were a big deal. So what I'm going to say in this session, I hope my dad listens to it but doesn't feel offended. I haven't watched a live sports game on TV in potentially a decade. I didn't marry a man who's super interested in it. So I don't think about these things in their modern form in the same way that I have the nostalgia thinking about them. So just to kind of bring up the 3 quick things, and then I'll dive into the conversation today. Number 1 is that I resubscribed for Apple TV for a while. I watched it for Ted Lasso, realized after I finished that I was paying for something that I wasn't really using, didn't go through other content, so decided that was going to be the one that I was going to cut. Whenever I cut something, I think about the business decision around it. So resubscribing for Apple TV was kind of interesting as well. We bought an Apple TV box and we use that for a lot of, we're homeschooling this year, so we use that for a lot of our display, and it came with 3 free months. I noticed that they had a live sports component when, the first thing that they showed us when they, either right when we talked about resubscribing or after resubscribing, was like, hey, we have live sports on here. I saw baseball, so I don't know how much that is. I don't know if it's every day. I don't know if it's every game, every team, etc. But that was interesting to me because that wasn't on there before, and I just had this moment when I was thinking about it. Second thing was that we bought into the kids club at the LA Angels games this year. And so my kids for $20 got 4 free tickets, a t-shirt, some swag, and they're starting to know players. We went to a game this week where they got a poster of Mike Trout, who just hit the 400 home run club. And so, my kids are not the kind of kids who could tell you players' names of even one team or stats like my dad and brother could when we were growing up. But there is an interest in sports in our house. And I was sitting there thinking about this moment inside the classroom where we're often teaching, where I ask people, what is the Red Sox? Is it a fixed or variable cost business? And I would say that's out of the 12 questions in a quiz that I give that's one of the most frequently incorrectly answered questions. And then the third one is this article that I found, and then we'll kind of kick off from there. But I just really wanted to have this conversation with you, Namaan, because I've never met someone in my life that I would rather be on a media trivia team with other than you. So I still remember like answering obscure questions about the 90s in a trivia session when you took all of these kind of media questions. So I'm excited to talk about it. But I saw this article just a day or two ago, and I thought, you know what, I have a vague enough understanding that if I wanted to be, if I didn't want to disclose that I didn't understand this, I could have a conversation about this intelligently. I don't have a deep understanding of it, and I thought a lot of our listeners might be in the same place. So this is the headline, right? NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell says the league could renegotiate media deals as soon as 2026. So I'll tell you what I saw at the beginning, and then I just want you to dive through this, and I'm going to ask you some questions. What I saw is that if the league believes that they could renegotiate media deals, they believe that they have leverage. Why would you renegotiate them early if you felt like you didn't have leverage? It means that potentially since the last negotiation, there is at least one other player that wasn't there before. So not only has it become more valuable to the people who were at the table before, but there's a new factor or a new player in the way that like we consume media. I also thought that I was in England when one of the first live NFL game was being played outside of the US. And I know that the NFL's strategy has not just been to drive US revenues through these kinds of media contracts, but also international revenues. And I was immediately thinking, like, what are those kind of contracts worth, and is that a piece of this growth? So anyhow, I'm just really interested when you read an article like this, what do you see? What do you know that you maybe even didn't realize that you knew? And I'll push in by asking some more questions as we go through this. So over to you, Namaan.
Yeah, absolutely, Jenny Rae. Well, first of all, your instinct is spot on. The NFL only comes out and does this because they feel like they have leverage, which they absolutely do, because live sports is really kind of the one cultural touchstone, at least in the US, where like there's a critical mass of people who are watching the same thing at the same time. So, like, if you are an advertiser looking to get in front of a critical mass of people, live sports is pretty much the one place where you can do it. Otherwise, like, the media ecosystem is just too fragmented now. And so it's very difficult to target a certain demographic of people outside of live sports. That's point one as far as why the NFL has leverage. Point two as to why they have leverage is because the demographic that consumes live sports, typically speaking, there's more segments than this, but the core demographic is young men, right? And I'd say age 18 to 35, and there's not one other media property that young men congregate around. And so if you're looking to target this very valuable demographic, often with some kind of disposable income, a demographic that makes emotional spending decisions, live sports is where you go get them. Otherwise, the cost of customer acquisition for that segment is incredibly expensive. And so the NFL realizes, not just because of like how big its audience is, but because of who its audience is, they have leverage with their media partners. And the third reason why they have leverage is because the platforms, the media networks who carry the NFL know that it's their golden goose when they go in turn to negotiate with their distributors. And so, like, why do you get better terms from cable networks? Why do you get better terms from YouTube TV if you are one of these networks? It's because you have live sports rights. And in the US, like the golden goose of sports rights is the NFL. And so for all of those reasons and more, the NFL feels like it has leverage. And I would say it feels rightly that it has leverage. Now, on top of that, why would you renegotiate now? Because to the best of my understanding, there's actually still 4 or 5 years left on the contract. And so, like, at first glance, you'd say, okay, the NFL, like, you're potentially leaving money on the table. Like, these networks, these media partners have already agreed to pay you billions of dollars a year, every year for the next 5 years. And so what does that give the NFL? It gives the NFL budget certainty, right? If they were not to, like, renegotiate early. So you must really feel like you are leaving money on the table to open up a renegotiation 4 years early. And you must feel like your partners cannot say no to you if you're even going to come up publicly and say you're thinking about it. And so that's the context. That's the background. I think just a couple of other factoids that are going to be useful for us as we move through this conversation. The NFL derives 2/3 of its revenue from its media partnerships. And so this is the biggest revenue stream for the league, like bar none. And so if you are looking to grow the pie as the commissioner of the NFL, which is it's your job to grow the business as the commissioner on top of other things, but that's one of your jobs. And so if you're looking to grow the pie, the single biggest lever that you can pull, it's not ticket sales, it's not merchandise, right? It is this. It's like your like media deals, your media partnerships. And so Goodell understands that. Um, that's why he's coming out and starting to lay the groundwork for a potential renegotiation. You're absolutely right. There are new players that have entered the media scene since the last time the NFL, negotiated with its partners. Right now, the way that the NFL is taking advantage of like just this interest in its inventory is that it has split its media rights up. So you cannot go to one place and get every NFL game that you want. So Thursday Night Football, it's on Amazon Prime and Amazon Prime only. Then you've got CBS and Fox who carry games. You have NBC and Peacock who have Sunday Night Football. You have ESPN and ABC who are owned by Disney who have Monday Night Football. And so you have Netflix who has the Christmas Day games. And so you have all of these players who have like a piece of the pie, and Netflix and YouTube TV are kind of the newest entrants into this space. YouTube TV had the opening Friday game of the season. I think they have one more exclusive game later on in the season. And so these, Netflix, YouTube TV paid like $100 or $200 million just for the rights to like the individual games that they're carrying a game. And so the NFL's like, oh, okay, like we have like new players who are cash flush in this ecosystem who are willing to spend a lot of money on individual games. Like, how much could we extract by giving them an actual package for a season? And so I think that this is some of kind of the backdrop and kind of why this is happening now. The last thing that I'll just mention, and then I'll open it up kind of for your insights and your questions as well, is just I think the one card that the NFL has to play here that I would make a lot of sense to me is like the amount of inventory that they have to offer media partners. And so there's been a lot of talk in league circles around like adding an 18th game to the regular season schedule. And so, if you follow the NFL and you follow sports, this to me would be a sign that the NFL is getting close to adding that 18th game. Because it makes sense to me that you go back to your media partners and you would say, hey, like our inventory has expanded, so we cannot operate under the same framework we've been operating under. You're paying us for like a 17-game season. We now have an 18-game season. This is like justification for a complete renegotiation. So I think that there's additional inventory that's coming. That's kind of the media language I'm going to use for games. And because there's additional inventory that's coming, there's a renegotiation that's going to happen. Do your projects ever drag? Budgets creep? Deadlines slip? Or worse, do you deliver something that meets the spec, but no one's happy with how it got done? If that sounds familiar, it's time for Management Consulted's Project Management Training. Our program brings consulting-level rigor. These are the same tools and approaches that top consulting firms use, in a format you can deploy across your team now. You'll learn how to build battle-tested project plans, anticipate and manage risk, align stakeholders early so surprises are minimized, track progress transparently, and hit those milestones without burning out resources. Each training includes tailored project templates, real case studies, and live feedback. No fluff, all impact. If you lead teams, work cross-functionally, or just want fewer late nights chasing deliverables, this is for you. Head to managementconsulted.com/project-management-training. That's managementconsulted.com/project-management-training to invest in a program that will save your team time, money, and heartache.
Okay, so let me just add on a couple of things. First of all, I don't know how you know that his name is Roger Goodell instead of Roger Goodell. So I think that's going to be a really important point for the listeners. But right when you said that, I was like, all right, I have to bring this up because the fact that you know that or surmise that, I think is fascinating in the first place. Second, when we bought our winery, one factor that we did not understand was that like effectively we could just be closed from the end of August through the end of December on Sundays, and it would barely affect our business because like when we bought the winery, we closed in March and we had great Sunday sales the whole way through, and that we don't have a TV where we're showing sports in the tasting room, and it was Gonski's. like after that, right? So that was kind of like when you mentioned the extension of the game, I think about all of the other businesses that are existentially affected positively or negatively by what happens in the NFL specifically on, Sundays. And then one of the things that we've noticed there is that there's a name for them, I think, Namaan, but like they're like they're like war widows on Sunday, right? They're like football widows, right? Where we're like basically like we have like now a large group of women and children who come and hang out on Sunday afternoons. And that's kind of like a building piece of our business. Um, and all of this to say, between the mention of his name and the insights that I've had from the winery, you mentioned earlier that the kind of largest congregation of these young men is super interesting and attractive, and I want to go back because I actually don't know if this is still true, but I want to understand why you say that, because what part of my early understanding when I was doing customer segmentation work at Bain is that like the differences between men and women's buying habits are pretty fascinating. So women are much more interested in purchasing something new, right? So grabbing like a piece of information. If you look at the portfolio of products that women own, it's incredibly large. That makes them both attractive from a new customer perspective and risky from a lifetime value perspective. And then I remember like looking at the difference between men's shoes and women's shoes specifically, and identifying that, like, I don't know if this is true for you, but like my husband, since I have married him, literally doesn't just wear the same shoe brand. He wears the same shoe. Like the shoe itself has not changed in 15 years. We always get it at the same place and it's on a cycle. Like we could probably be subscription customers, but he is a lifetime value, much more valuable customer for a specific brand. So pressure testing that, I don't know if that's true, but is it because of you mentioned impulse spend, and that was actually counterintuitive for me. I thought like if I were looking at targeting markets, I would imagine that females are actually easier to persuade. But lifetime value would make sense for me, but it's possible that there have been generational shifts because I did that work, a hot minute ago. So anyhow, when you say that they're really valuable, I want to know why. I want to understand like what it is about that segment that's so valuable.
Yeah. I think what's most valuable about them is that you can't find them anywhere else, like in one mass. So
Scarcity.
scarcity.
This is like the watering hole where they all come.
This is the watering hole where critical mass. And I'm not saying that women don't watch the NFL. Like, don't misunderstand me.
Totally.
Like, they do. But like in terms of that cohort, that segment, this is like really one of the few places that they congregate. And so if you want to at scale like reach that cohort of customers, this is one of the ways that you do it. This is the place that you do it. And so you're absolutely right. Men are generally speaking more brand loyal. Um, I'm the same way about certain things. It's like once I've done my research and made a decision once around a brand and a certain model, that's it. Like I'm a customer for life. I don't want to go through and do that work again. And so men are more brand loyal. Typically the lifetime value is higher, but you are also seeing like higher levels of what I would call impulse spending from this cohort as well. And I think that's categorized by like the rise in sports gambling and betting that you see. And so like a lot of that is impulse, what I'll call spending. And so I think it tracks that a lot of the commercials and the messaging that you see around these games is sports gambling, betting, etc. And so like this isn't just a lucrative cohort from like a lifetime value perspective. Like it's becoming easier and easier now, I think, for people to maybe spend money they weren't planning to spend or spend more than they were planning to spend than it has been in generations past. And there's lots of reasons for that, right? There are some people who just feel like, hey, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. So like, what the heck, right? Might as well just buy XYZ. Or, hey, you know what? Like my retirement portfolio, like maybe like coming out of school, I got a job in consulting. I got a job in investment banking. I'm working at IBM as a systems engineer, and my 401k already, like at 24 years old, is worth $200,000. So I'm feeling flush, right? Like I might as well just buy XYZ. I think like there are, multiple factors why you're seeing more impulse spending from young men today than you have in the past.
Got it. So basically, like the delay of expenses is one of the main
Yep.
things too, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Like you
people
don't.
are getting married later, buying houses later, having kids later. And so there is spend that's unlocked because of that.
You said something else that was really interesting here that I want to press in on. When you were talking about the fragmentation of spend, I did not know that. So I didn't know that if I wanted to watch the NFL, I needed to know what day, what category, what team, even what specific game I was looking for in order to know where I needed to go find it. So do I have to be a subscriber? Right? Do I have to be a subscriber to Netflix? Because for me, a lot of the way that the agencies have made the money is through the distribution of their ad spend. Right. So the NFL is, like you mentioned, this is a place where people congregate. The ad spend is valuable, but the ad spend is
Yeah.
only valuable if you are a network, and if you have viewers. And so like there's kind of this weird, chicken egg situation where you want to have subscribers, but you need to have enough subscribers for the ad spend to be valuable. So that's kind of question number one do I have to subscribe to every one of these channels? Is this a way of like bundling an unbundled life? But then secondarily, like, do you ever see a future where there would be a bundle where like the only place you would go watch the NFL is X, and who's the buyer if that's the case? Because I can see how the NFL right now, today, would say we can extract maximum value by fragmenting this out. Give everybody a little bit of piece of the pie. Nobody would be willing to spend whatever the aggregate spend is on the rights.
Correct.
Like nobody would be willing to spend that number. But there is probably, there was before, and there may be again in the future, a player who would actually be willing to do that. So I'm wondering, do you think we're headed back toward consolidation, or do you think we're headed toward potentially more fragmentation?
I don't. I think we're heading to more fragmentation. I actually don't think it's in the NFL's best interest for their media rights to be consolidated. I think they're worth more apart than they are together. That's number one. Number two, it actually gives like the NFL's own media property like an opportunity to have a voice. Like the NFL has its own streaming platform called NFL Plus. They have their own network called NFL Network. They just took a 10% equity stake in ESPN. So I think you're going to see like more of a tie-up between like NFL media and ESPN. And like if you have like one consolidated rights holder for all of your inventory, then why is anyone going to go to a media property that you own for any kind of content? So I think because there's fragmentation, the NFL has actually been able to carve out like viewership and distribution that it owns, like from top to bottom, in a way that they wouldn't have been able to if, let's say, Amazon just held the rights to every single game and every single highlight reel.
And so going back to our like Amazon Sachs conversation from before and the DraftKings conversation, here's what I hear you say. I'm actually accessing potentially a lot of the same customers, but not the entire same group. So that gives me advertiser leverage, right? Because the advertisers can't choose which games to be on. They need to be on all of the games because that's how they reach the entire pool of consumers. And then it also gives me leverage, vis-a-vis each one of my negotiating partners, because none of them hold the pie, therefore none of them own the customer. And so I am actually like maintaining the customer relationship, not the channel itself.
100%. And there's a downside risk to that too, is that if the viewing experience becomes too fragmented, then you risk fan disengagement. So I think
Correct.
that's the balance that the NFL has to strike. I think they've done a very good job of striking that so far. But yes, they want to own that customer relationship as much as possible. And the networks and the media partners just have to deal with it, because like we said, like there's no other programming in the country right now that draws the volume of viewers that the NFL does. I think I saw something recently where like 90 of the top 100 shows last year were NFL games in terms of viewership. Like if you count a
like
game as a
not
show.
like not only live viewership or all viewership.
Live viewership.
Okay,
So like
because
90 of the
that
top
would
100,
track for me.
90 of the top 100 kind of like live TV events last year in the US were NFL games. And
Kind of
so
want to know what the other ones were.
yeah. Maybe there's like a NBA Finals Game 7 that's snuck in there.
Yeah.
Maybe there's
I was gonna say like a
right?
World
Like,
Series final or something. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so, but like 9 out of 10 are the NFL, and so they they're not just giving you access to like a valuable cohort for advertisers, but it's just like you can't find that volume of viewers anywhere else. And so that's a powerful combination.
That's really interesting. Okay, and then one other thing that I just wanted to talk about is actually the fundamental business model here, of the NFL. Like, what is the NFL actually? Because I think a lot of people don't know about it. When I asked the question earlier about the Boston Red Sox, right, about a sports team, like what are they, a fixed or a variable cost business? I was brought back to a conversation that I had said at a fundraiser earlier this year, and I didn't know it at the beginning, but by the end of the conversation, I found out the guy that I was sitting next to, he was like, "Yeah, I brought my family to a Premier League game," and it turns out he was the owner of the team. And he said like that there is no more rigorous vetting organization than the NFL for owners, right? Like you can't just become an owner if you have enough money or if you're willing to buy a team. Like you also have to be approved by the NFL in order to become an owner of one of these teams. And I think the listeners are going to need to know who your team is and why. That's number one. Number two, though, is like, is this a fixed or a variable cost business? If I am a team and if I'm the NFL, right? Because the two are actually different, right? So like
They are.
the team, the Miami Dolphins, which was my dad's team growing up, the poor Dolphins for the last like 2 decades have suffered. But the Miami Dolphins, right, are one part of the business, and then the NFL is actually a different entity. So can you just talk a little bit about those differences too? Because again, I think some people will find this. Some of you may know this intrinsically, but you may never put business words to it.
Yeah. So the way that I think about it is the NFL is like a holding company, if you will. And then you have like, I think of the teams as part of the portfolio, but they're independently owned, operated, and managed. So every team has its own owner or ownership group, and they run the team like its own business. But like it is under the NFL umbrella, meaning they have to adhere to the NFL's rules and regulations. Really, what the teams have done is they have come together and created what I would call a union, right? So they collectively bargain their media rights. So instead of the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys negotiating their own media rights, like the teams have come together and said, we have more bargaining power when we are together. And so the NFL is really the vehicle through which they bargain externally. And it's also the vehicle through which they agree to like a standard set of rules and regulations they all abide by to ensure as an even of a playing field as possible. So that's kind of how I see the difference between the NFL as an entity and then each team as an entity. And, you know, I think of the teams as fixed cost businesses primarily. And the reason I say that is because, you know, whether your media rights are, you know, 1 billion or 2 billion, whether you have 20,000 or 70,000 people in a stadium, it's going to cost you about the same to like operate and play a game. And so, you know,
What are you spending money on? Because this is like some people can't trigger that, and I think that's the main issue when they can't think of the answer to this question.
So your number one cost center inside of the league and for each team is the talent, right? So the NFL, these teams are their media and entertainment businesses. And so the talent is the players. That is your number one cost center. And so if you think about the NFL, like about 47 to 48% of the revenue is shared directly with the players. And that's where you get the salary cap from. And so, like, you know,
but not based on like how much they make on the ads for that game, right? It's not a direct relationship.
No, because the NFL doesn't make money on ads. The networks make money on ads,
exactly,
right? The NFL makes money from the networks, right? So the networks are cutting them a check every year, and so let's say it's $8 billion. Okay, well, like half of that money goes to the owners of the teams, and there's like a formula, there's an algorithm that determines how much each team gets. Okay, and then like the other half, let's say, goes to the players, and the way it goes to the players is through like a salary cap. Okay, that means every team can spend up to $180 million a year on player salaries. And so when these media rights deals come into effect, the salary cap explodes, it goes up. And so now teams are legally allowed to spend more on players, so contract values go up. And so kind of that's how the players are directly benefiting. But it's a fixed cost business because if the ratings are down for 1 week or for one game, or if like the live if people in the stands are less for one week or one game, like that doesn't affect how much the players make. Right?
Viewership is down, right? Yeah, exactly.
Like because that's already been determined like from like past performance. So like I think of these teams as primarily fixed cost businesses.
So I love that thought about the NFL like being kind of like a union manager. So basically, what you're saying is that the NFL doesn't distribute 100% of those revenues, right? There's some kind of cut that the NFL is taking, and again, it's not variable because these are pre-negotiated contracts. But the NFL is a like management organization, right?
It is.
And so you can see where there's interest alignment, right? If you have higher quality teams and more exciting games and better negotiating partners with distribution and with ultimately the advertisers of those distributors, especially if they're in different places, then you have better access to what you're trying to do. But the NFL as that kind of agency, I think, is a super interesting parallel that I'd never thought of.
And all they're doing is sharing revenue with the teams every year. And so, do the teams have their own revenue streams? Absolutely, right? Like they have ticket sales, they have merchandise, they have in-game experiences. They might own their own media properties, like they might own their own radio network, for example, right? And there are rules and regulations around that too. Like they have to share some of that revenue back with the league, right? Because what the league cares about most from a competitive balance perspective is parity. Like one of the things that drives interest in the league is that the fans of every fan base think like, hey, we could win this year, right? Like we have an opportunity to be successful. And so like the NFL,
Unless
one
you're
of
the
their
Miami
main jobs,
Dolphins.
yeah, exactly. Or unless you're the Cincinnati Bengals, which is my team. But
I
generally
was going to ask
speaking,
you because I was like, you did not disclose. So is there a reason for that? Okay, so
and
now we know it's the Bengals.
so one of Goodell's jobs is to ensure that parity and that competitive balance, because that's what leads to like close games, higher ratings. That's what leads to like each fan base or almost every fan base reasonably thinking that there's some kind of level of success they could achieve this year, and that's what continues to fuel interest in the league. And so a lot of the revenue sharing, the salary cap, like all of the mechanisms that have been set up in place are to ensure that competitive balance, because that is like existential to the business. If you don't have competitive balance, you don't have the leverage with the media partners that you do right now.
So good. That's awesome. Well, if you have wondered what the NFL actually does, the NFL is a business, not just a organization, and they're a different kind of business than each of the individual teams. They're also a totally different business than networks. I think this is a really interesting conversation, Namaan, about the kind of very symbiotic relationship. We've done an episode on an advertiser on DraftKings, and we'll link to that here. But there are these multiple players in a lot of these negotiations. I think we should probably do one on the way that the networks, or in other situations, the streaming services think about these negotiations as well. Because historically, it was all about ad revenue. But like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you answered that question directly, but that you have different incentives. If you require people to subscribe, you have the same kind of like longevity or lifetime value of a customer that's different than being able to place an ad.
And these streamers, they get to have their cake and eat it too. So, for example, the games on Netflix, you have to be a subscriber, and you also have to there's just ad inventory that's sold along with those games. So you still have the same kind of commercial breaks, because those are built into the games as well. And one of the ways that the NFL ensures parity with its media partners is that every media partner like has to like adhere to like the timeout schedule and like the commercial schedule. And so whether you're a streamer or not, like you are gonna have the same amount of ad inventory to sell if you're Netflix as opposed to CBS. And so
I had to reach a certain amount of scale in order to get the ad revenue, but I'm constantly balancing that, right? Because I need viewers to come so that I have the ad revenue, but I also am making money on the back end from my subscribers.
I think you just need to reach a certain amount of scale to where you can afford the media rights. You just need to be able to afford to buy in, right? And then if you can afford to buy in, the viewers will come and the advertisers will come. You just have to get to that point where you can just like get the rights the first time. Right. And so for the Christmas Day games on Netflix, for example, you have to be a Netflix subscriber. You will also see ads. So they're monetizing you two ways on those games.
Are there new players that will enter the space that we haven't thought of yet? Like, will Instagram TikTok, right? Another player that I'm not thinking of right now, ever be a part of this ecosystem in a way that, YouTube TV and Netflix are now.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. I think that this landscape's only going to get more fragmented in the future. These linear TV networks, your CBS, your Fox, your NBC, like their cash flows are declining, their purchasing power is declining, and these rights are only exploding in value. So I think there's coming a day where, like, for 50 years we've watched the NFL on like these linear TV networks. There's coming a day where like they're not going to have the rights anymore, and you are going to have to be subscribed to 5 different streaming services to watch every game the way that you want. Right? Like Amazon's flexing its muscles here. Apple's gonna flex its muscles. Netflix is like flexing its muscles here. I think that these streamers run incredibly cash flush businesses. They have incredibly strong free cash flow. They can outbid the NBCs and CBSs of the world. And because like a lot of those streaming businesses are subsidized by other parts of their business, like they don't even have to like make money immediately on that investment in a way that a network does. Like, for example, Apple sells more iPhones, they can afford to lose money on Apple TV, right? Like that's just an inherent advantage that a lot of these streaming platforms have that the networks will never have. And so I think you're going to see like a day where all of the rights are streaming only.
How interesting. Okay. Well, if you've got predictions, hot takes, or if you just want to share a picture of us in your favorite jersey with your favorite team, Namaan, I don't know, can we get that commitment from you? Or there's got to be like a Super Bowl, whatever, from the day the Bengals made it, right?
Oh yeah, I
To
was at that
share
game.
with I know, but we need evidence. Like we're gonna need to have.
I'll have to
This
see
is
if
what
I
the
can
people
dig
come
up a
for,
photo.
Namaan.
It's a bad memory because we lost at the end. So there's nothing worse than losing the Super Bowl. But I'll see if I can dig up a photo and share it on the feed.
Well, you could have not been there, I suppose, is the other piece of that. But yeah, we're gonna need that. That's gonna be super important here. I just want to say thank you, Namaan, for this conversation. I knew you were the guy to have this with. And I think that if anybody wants to play a later game of sports trivia, I think we would have a really active audience in that. So we might need to make that happen live on the YouTube channel at some point. Speaking of which, if you have not subscribed to wherever you are listening to this, whether it is audio or video or both, we would love to have you as a subscriber of this channel. We come up with these ideas based on our real life conversations, based on ideas that you send us. The questions that you have about business, and we're driven by your curiosity. So please weigh in on that for future episodes. Write us and say hello. We'd love to give you shout outs. And again, Namaan, thanks so much for the conversation. Really enjoyed it today.